cars are driving me nuts. Okay, so I want to start off by thanking everyone for letting me know your thoughts on the last video. The top comments that I got were, number one, sit up straighter. No one wants to see your muffin top. Totally noted. I tried to scoot forward a little bit, and so hopefully that's not much of an issue anymore. Number two, be more deliberate about your framing and make sure to clean your room. My mom was actually the one who gave me that second piece of advice. Taken care of. Hopefully this looks a little more structured. So on to the question. This week, the question that I will be answering comes from Michael P. And he asks, why does anxiety make us feel like we're going crazy? And does it have the capability to actually make us go crazy? I especially wanted to answer this question because I know that so many of us have trouble with it. And to make matters worse, our therapists, our doctors, and even psychiatrists sometimes don't know how to explain this symptom properly. But I think once we understand how it works from a physiological and a psychological perspective, it becomes a lot easier to dismiss any worries that we have about them. And so for this video, I want to do a quick little dive into how our brain produces thoughts and how exactly we decide what to do with them. Understanding why our brain produces these thoughts of going crazy and why exactly they end up being so powerless over us in the end requires understanding one important idea about the brain, and that's that the part of the brain that produces thoughts and the part of the brain that decides what to do with them are actually physically separate. And that means that no matter what kind of thoughts our brain produces, they do not have a direct impact on our behavior. As for that part of the brain that makes thoughts, the most important thing to keep in mind is that this part of the brain is outside of our conscious control. The way that this thought-producing part of our brain behaves is a lot like all of the other unconscious parts of our body, in that it's usually a reaction to our environment or our situation, whatever is going on around us. So, for example, when we feel hungry and when our stomach rumbles, it is this part of the brain that's responsible for creating a thought like, oh, maybe I should eat. If we enter a situation where we've been uncomfortable before, it is also this part of the brain that creates a thought like, oh no, maybe I shouldn't stick around, maybe I should get out of here. Thoughts of going crazy also originate from this part of the brain, and much like those other two examples, they originate for a pretty logical reason. When we're in an experience of high anxiety, when we have a lot of adrenaline running through our system, we experience some pretty crazy symptoms, pardon the pun. We can start to feel depersonalization or derealization. We become very hypersensitive to our surroundings, and sometimes that causes us to see things out of the corner of our eyes or to jerk around. And so when we can't find anything in our environment that's causing us to feel this way, naturally our brain creates the thought like, oh, am I going crazy? As any experienced therapist, doctor, or psychiatrist can tell you, the presence of these symptoms doesn't mean we're actually going crazy. However, our unconscious brain, not knowing any better, takes a kind of best guess and says, maybe this is what's happening. And that's what causes this thought to be produced. Once that thought is produced in the unconscious part of our brain, it is then sent to our conscious brain to give us a chance to respond or to act a certain way. And this is where it goes awry for some of us. Now, just to be clear, all of us have thoughts of going crazy, whether it's those of us going through an experience of high anxiety or those who have never felt anxious in their entire lives. The difference between those who have trouble and those who don't is in that response. I go into more detail about why exactly this is the case in my book, but the important takeaway here is when we worry, it actually causes the unconscious part of our brain to produce more of these thoughts of going crazy, and not fewer. And so a lot of us get trapped in this kind of cycle. A thought pops into our head about going crazy, and then we worry about actually going crazy. Or an intrusive thought pops into our head, and we worry about that thought being the cause of some mental disorder and about actually losing our minds. Paradoxically, this response actually causes the symptom to strengthen. That said, the key to breaking out of that cycle is no longer worrying about the presence of these thoughts of going crazy when they arise, which, I'm aware, kind of sounds like a crazy thought in and of itself. So let me give you something to help you out. Knowing what you know about the biology of our brain now, that the thought producer and the decision maker are physically separate, you can put some of the experiences that you've had in the past into perspective. If you look at all of the times that you've experienced this symptom, that you have had these thoughts of going crazy, you can see that no matter how strongly they came, you never made any decisions that would indicate that you were actually crazy. You never had an episode of psychosis. You never screamed out in that business meeting in front of everyone. You never jumped off that building no matter how many thoughts came to you. You never drove off the road, and you never stabbed your partner in a fit of insanity. And the reason for that is, again, that the part of our brain that creates these thoughts has no direct control over the part of our brain that decides what to do with them. And what that means is that if you have not yet decided to jump off a building accidentally, or scream out in a business meeting when you haven't wanted to, it means that you will not do so in the future. So every time these thoughts pop into your head and you're tempted to worry about them, you can give them two answers. Number one, physically, it's impossible for me to go crazy. No matter how many of these thoughts pop into my head, I will always be able to choose what to do with them. And number two, I have not chosen to do anything crazy with these thoughts so far, and so I can reasonably say that I will not choose to do anything crazy in the future. Now, these are just two responses that you can give, and in fact, I personally had some other responses that worked much better for me and were much more robust in the long term. I plan to go over these in a future episode, but if you're curious about them and want to shortcut the process, you can always just get a copy of my book on Amazon. Link will be below. In any case, I hope that answers your question, Michael, and that you can use some of the information in this video to answer any urges to worry about this symptom next time it comes up. Before I finish the video, I do have a bit of a personal request. I just started this channel recently, and as I'm sure a lot of you know, getting a channel off the ground is really, really difficult. So I would really appreciate it if you could share this video with anyone who you think could possibly use it. Or just post it on social media, something like Twitter or Facebook. In addition, if you could drop a like, and if you're interested in more content, please make sure to subscribe. That way I know that there is an actual demand for these kinds of videos, and that people actually do want more questions about this to be answered. That said, I would also really appreciate if you left any questions you have for me down in the comments of this video as well. That way I can know exactly what kind of questions you want answered in the next video. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. Really appreciate it. See you guys next week.